Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High-impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Max Story.
Hello, and thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. So today we're up to Chapter 7 in Ria's book, The Ladder of Influence, 5 Steps for Climbing to the Next Level and Beyond. And again, just a reminder, I'm just sharing my thoughts. I'm not reading her book by any means, word for word. Just going through it, sharing my thoughts on it, using her thoughts to provoke my thoughts, so maybe I can provoke your thoughts. That's what's happening here. This episode is titled Demonstrating Self-Control at Work. In Chapter 7, the actual title of the book is The First Step at Work. And this will be kind of like last week's episode. I'll teach you a little bit of stuff up front, and then I'm going to have this checklist at the end. And if I ain't mistaken, every one of the steps has this checklist for, applying the step at home and applying the step at work. So checklists probably are the most valuable part of this series around the context and content of the book. So there's a quote from Joyce Meyer. She says, "I've learned that I really do have discipline, self-control, and patience, but they were given to me as a seed, and it's up to me to choose to develop them." We've all got this stuff inside of us, but we got to develop it. Anyone can develop discipline. Anyone can develop self-control. Anyone can develop patience. And I'm telling you, from discipline, I've been okay with, but still, that's relative. It depends on what you're talking about. I hadn't been disciplined all my life at leading myself well. Used to, I was like a clown. I was an idiot. So I got that wrong. Self-control and patience, I was off the map. I was so weak in those areas, but I'm really good in all three of these areas now. And for me to be able to say that, I can tell you anybody can improve. If I can improve in those areas relative to who I was, so can you. And at work was one of the worst places when I was younger. I'm 55 today, but in my early years, especially those first 10 years or so, boy, I was a lot of trouble for a lot of bosses. And they were not great leaders. They didn't teach us personal growth, leadership development. If they had, maybe I might have gotten better sooner, but they hadn't worked on developing themselves either, so they just had to put up with me. I didn't know how to control myself, and they didn't know how to handle me and a lot of other people or themselves, so it was just round and round we went, and I was a troublemaker. But I was a high performer, so I got to keep working. I never got fired. Should have been fired 100 times, but I got promoted 14 times in my 20-year manufacturing career. How you get promoted 14 times? You start at the very bottom and you take little steps. That's how. And what I mean by promoting is going from one job to another with a pay raise to another job, getting pay raises and different jobs. Pretty much those are 14 different jobs I had where I got raises throughout my 20-year career. That's what I'm talking about there. It ain't so cut and dry as when you're in the military and you get promoted from one rank to the next. It's all over the place. But that's what I'm talking about. So let's talk about control of self at work. Let's talk about it a little bit before I get to the checklist, which I'm looking forward to getting to. So influence, Ria says, is built much like a cathedral, one brick at a time. This book, remember the title of it? The Ladder of Influence. We're trying to climb it one step at a time. And then we're trying to maintain that level. Whatever step we're on, we don't with somebody, we don't want to lose it. And again, you can be on different steps with different people. Some people you don't even have a relationship with, so you ain't on the first step. You ain't on any step. There is no ladder between you and them. There's no influence, authentic influence. But that's how it's built. Just like a great cathedral, you don't go out there and build it instantly. One brick at a time, one block at a time, one piece at a time. We talk about developing your influence. high level, high degree of influence, authentic influence, is learning to master one principle at a time, one high value character trait at a time, learning to master that, learning to become that. As Rhea often says, this type of development, it's not about doing something different. It's about being someone different. That's why my book, Blue Collar Leadership and Teamwork, 30 Traits of High Impact Players. Every one of those chapters starts with the word be. B-E. Be trustworthy, be responsible, be growth oriented, be all these things. All these things that every team member wish everybody on their team would be, but most of the team members are not these things. But if leaders take that book, do book studies with it, then they can help instill these principles and develop this mindset within everybody on their team. But the leader has to model the way. So Rhea says work ethic and ability to control our emotions relative to the work itself and the people we work with is either helping us climb the ladder of influence or holding us back. And we're talking about at work. This chapter is about at work. So who you are, how well you control yourself, your behavior, your emotions, all that stuff, it's either launching you or limiting you relative to your climb up this ladder of influence with your boss, with your coworker. Remember, there's a ladder between you and every person. And we're just slowly and methodically, week after week, chugging along. I'm taking you through this process. But again, you ain't got to wait on me. Get the book, get the video course, dive in, keep listening to the podcast. You can read this book in 2, 3, 4 hours. You can be all the way through this book in an afternoon. Then you can use it as a tool. You can go back and reference the chapters each week as we go through this podcast. Or you can get on the video course, and that's an 8-hour course, 7.5 hours. But don't blame me if it's taking 30 weeks. I heard some people mention before, man, I love your book study series, but your book series on your podcast, but man, it takes 30 weeks. Hey, get the book. But the book's different, right? Some people tell me they like hearing me talk. They like hearing my version, my stories, my insight. The way a lot of people tell me I make things that are kind of hard to understand, real easy to understand. That's because I'm simple. The simpler you make it, the more people that's going to understand, the more people you can help. Rhea says the biggest opportunity for having control of self relative to work comes when change happens. Ain't that the truth? She knows about that, and I know about that. Rhea and I wrote a book called Change Happens, Leading Yourself and Others Through Change. That's a great book. There's a video course on it as well. Most leaders, you're talking about leading well at work, most leaders hope their team deals with change. High impact leaders help their teams deal with change. They help develop that mindset. But think about this opportunity of having control of self at work. This is real clear. When I'm talking about that book, I say this a lot. When change happens, guess what some people do? They whine. They moan, groan, and whine about the change. Guess what some other people do? They shine. They embrace change. They leverage change. Some of them lead change. You see the difference in those two people? Which one you think's building the most influence with the leaders of that organization? The one who can give them raises, the one who can give them promotions, the one who can give them a good recommendation for another job, or whether it's inside the company in a different department or outside the company. See, that's just one example relative to change. I always say when change happens, some people shine, some people whine. When change happens, some people thrive, some people take a dive. It's all related to control of self. The next thing she's got to say here, the second biggest opportunity to increase your influence at work through control of self is to become more valuable to others, meaning developing yourself and intentionally adding value to everyone around you. So the biggest opportunity she's saying, Rhea, and I agree, it's so easy to shine when change happens because everybody else is going to be whining. Not everybody, but most people. Unless you're working in a high performance team, with a phenomenal culture in an organization where that's all they bring into the organization. They're growing and developing people, and you got a high performance team. Most people ain't working in that world. They could be, but they don't have leaders capable of creating that world because they ain't done all the stuff I'm talking to you about right here. So change is just an opportunity to jump ahead of everybody else. When they start whining, you start shining. I figured that one out too. We got lots of stories in that book. And I got a podcast series already on that book. I don't remember what number it starts out, but go to YouTube, Blue Collar Leadership YouTube channel, and look on the playlist, and you can find it right there. Pretty easy. And then the second biggest opportunity, she says, after change is becoming more valuable. So if you can deal with change in a positive, proactive way, and you can lead yourself well and become more valuable, think how valuable are you going to be to the leader? You imagine you got one person who, when change happens, they whine, and this person's not developing themselves or anybody else. Then you got another person, when change happens, they shine, and they're growing and developing themselves, and they're growing and developing other people on their team. They may be even growing and developing the leader. Which one of them people is more valuable to the company? Which one's going to thrive in life? Which one's going to get more promotions, more raises, have more options, all that stuff? It's obvious. It's common sense. But as I write about in Blue Collar Leadership, Leading from the Front Lines, common sense is never enough. To do the things Rhea's talking about in this book and the things I'm sharing with you on this podcast, you got to have you got to have a whole lot more than common sense. You got to have uncommon sense. All the stuff I'm telling you, anybody who's listening with a rational mind would say, oh yeah, that's right. It's because it's common sense. Doing these things, it makes common sense that I should do these things. It's common sense. My life will get better. My influence will increase. Common sense. Anybody should know that. That's what common sense means. Actually doing these things, well, that requires uncommon sense. That requires a higher level of intellectual capacity, the ability to lead yourself. That's what we're talking about. That's what you got to develop. Uncommon sense. Everybody knows they should do it, but guess what? Not many people do it. Just like I was talking about change. Common sense says when change happens, you want to build more influence at work. Shine, don't whine. Look around. What's everybody doing? Most people are whining because they ain't got uncommon sense. Let's talk about this checklist. This checklist is to help you with control of self at work. And remember, Rhea gives us, at the end, she gives us in parentheses, in the book, in parentheses, a tip to help you understand what she's talking about. So I'm gonna read the checklist item, and I'll give you the tip. First item on the checklist: I accept responsibility for my career choices. The related tip: my choices brought me to where I am today. Her little tip at the end is to provoke thought relative to the checklist item here. She's saying, I accept responsibility for my career choices, meaning I got to look in the mirror and say, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be today based on every choice I've made leading up today. There's a lot of people think they should be somewhere else. They ought to be making this much money. They ought to be in this job. They ought to have this job title. They ought to be working in this company. Blah, 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 blah. You're exactly where you're supposed to be, just like me, just like Rhea, just like everybody you work with. Everybody is exactly where they're supposed to be based on every choice they made up to that moment. If you understand that, you 100% buy into that, you can check that box. If you think you're supposed to be somewhere else, or somebody's held you back, or you just got the short end of the stick, or why ever you didn't get promoted and somebody else did, and on, you got excuses, you don't get to check this box. I think you can feel I like this checklist. I liked it last time. I liked it this time. I'm gonna like the next one we do when we get to that part of the next step. Checklist item number 2. And she don't have them numbered in the book. I'm just telling you it's the second one. Here we go. I actively control my emotions at work. Her thought-provoking tip at the end. My goal is to build trust, so I pause, reflect, and think before speaking or acting with coworkers, in meetings, with clients, etc. That's one. I actually, most of these, like I told you already last time, when I first started my growth journey in 2008, 20 years into my career, I couldn't check hardly any of these boxes, maybe none. I definitely didn't control my emotions at work ever in those 20 years. I'm talking about I couldn't check this box ever in 20 years of working as an adult. But as I mentioned to you, when I dove into personal growth and leadership development content in 2008, that's the first thing I realized, the most important principle I ever learned. I already taught it to you earlier. Between stimulus and response, I have the freedom to pause and choose my response. I didn't understand that till I heard it, and then I started thinking on it and reflecting on it like I've been talking to you. All this stuff we're teaching you and telling you, Rhea and I have lived it. You can live it. Your life will change. Item number 3 on this checklist, I show up on time for work and meetings. Notice, and meetings. A lot of people show up on time for work, but they don't show up on time at the meetings. Sometimes the worst offender of that is the boss. Her thought-provoking tip, and I make sure to prepare for the day or the meeting in advance. Some people go to work early. They don't get paid for it. They may go in 30 minutes early to talk to the prior shift or just to get set up and get ready to go, and they're doing that on their own time. Nobody told them to. They over-delivering because they're preparing right there for the day, so that when they get going, they want to perform at a high level. That's an individual choice. A lot of people can't check that box, even though it's a fairly simple box to check. But it's all about control of self. Some people lose their jobs because they can't show up at work on time. Sometimes they can't show up at work at all. The next item in the checklist, I finish on time and keep my commitments to my boss, my teammates, my clients, and others within the community. We talked about keeping commitments before on a personal level, at home. You got to do it at work too. It's a reflection of your character. But I'm going to tell you this, if you're the kind of person that keeps commitments, guess where you keep them? Everywhere. If you're the kind of person that breaks commitments, guess where you break them? Everywhere. Who you are is who you are. Like I always say, who you are sometimes is who you are all the time. Her thought-provoking tip at the end, I don't make promises I can't or won't keep. If I say I will do something, I do it. See, that says a lot about somebody's character right there, what she said at the end. If I say I'll do something, I do it. Someone with a high degree of integrity, that's why they keep commitments right there. Because if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it because I said I was going to do it. No other reason but that right there. And again, I'm human. I make mistakes. I ain't perfect with that. I forget things sometimes. When I forget it, I hate it and I apologize for it and I do my best to make up for it. But if I say I'm going to do something and I don't do it, it's because I forgot it. It ain't because I just didn't do it. It ain't because I remember inside, well, I didn't want to do that. I told him I'd do it, but I ain't going to do it. That don't never happen, ever. But I might forget, or I get busy, or I tell somebody I'll do something. I forget to put it in my calendar. Maybe if maybe I just told somebody I'm going to do something, and maybe I'm about to put it in my calendar, and my phone rings, and now I'm talking to a client or a potential client, and maybe they want to do a book deal and get us to come speak. And when I get done with that, I got to put it in our system, and I got to start ordering books and making hotel. And I might forget the other call I was on, 5 seconds before the phone rang. And then I forget to make a note of that. And then I forget to do whatever it was I said. I'm 100% guilty of that. Not a lot, but that can happen with me. But I'm not going to tell you I'm going to do something. And then I know it and I remember it, and then I just don't do it. That ain't going to happen. Used to be that guy, because that's a lie. I'm not a liar. So I ain't going to, if somebody tells you they're going to do something, they don't do it, they just lied to you. Besides, they didn't do that and keep their commitment. They lied to you. When you tell somebody you're going to do something, you don't do it, you're lying to people. in your professional career, it costs you a lot of money if you got a problem with integrity. Well, that's a good checklist. I got to get going. She got a lot to get through here still. Next item. I respond to emails, messages, and phone calls within 24 hours. Remember we were talking about at work. Her tip, thought-provoking tip, even if I can't address it right away, I acknowledge receipt of the email or message. Well, that's the thing that drives me nuts with people right there. If people email me, I try to do my best to just say received. If I can't say nothing else, I type back the word received. One word with a period. So they know I got it, and they ain't wondering if I got it. They ain't wondering if I read it out of however many hundreds of emails. You know, people, I remember when I used to work in manufacturing, I'd have 200-300 emails. I know people like that today. They may get more than that in a day. They are not reading all those emails. And if you're sending emails to people like that, you don't even know if they read it. So I like to say received. I might not be able to answer right now. I try to answer within 24 hours like Rhea's talking about, meaning give a real answer. But whenever I see it, open it, if I read it, I hit received on there. Or I reply with received. Common courtesy. A lot of times when I send other people emails, I try to help them do that. I put somewhere in the email in bold, black bold with a yellow background, please acknowledge receipt. That's all I want to know. Did you get it? Do that for other people. Be proactive. Just tell them you got it. On text message, I hit the little thumbs up or whatever so somebody know I read it. Next item on the list. I go above and beyond when supporting others. Thought-provoking tip she has. I realize if I want to become more valuable, I must deliver more value. Look at that common sense thing right there again. Anybody with common sense would agree with that, but it takes uncommon sense to actually become more valuable when you don't have to, simply because you want to. That's second mile service to your team, your boss, your coworkers, your peers, doesn't matter who. People report to you. Can you check that box? Not that you did it once or you do it every now and then. Do you do this habitually, meaning this is who you are, this is the kind of person you are? That's what you got to look at. If you get this book, especially, and you try to check these off when you can see them and keep track of them, you got to be consistent at doing this stuff. It's something you do continuously and consistently, not something you done once. Say, oh yeah, I can check that off. I did it like 2 weeks ago with so and so. No, you got to do this on a regular basis to get credit on this checklist. Otherwise, you're cheating yourself, thinking you way better than you actually are. The next item. I realize I'm working for myself and my work ethic is impacting my influence. Thought-provoking tip. I don't explain to coworkers or customers, and I am fully engaged. Oh, I don't complain. Excuse me. I said don't explain. I was wondering when I read that didn't make sense. Looked at it wrong. I don't complain to coworkers or customers, and I am fully engaged. That's a good one right there. I realize I'm working for myself. I write about it in the Blue Collar Leadership Leading from the Front Lines book. A lot of people think they're working for their company. No, you're getting paid by your company for the work you do, but you're working for yourself. And when you understand that, you do a better job if you understand everything Rhea's teaching you in this book and I'm sharing with you on this podcast series. Because if you're working for yourself, everybody is your customer. You want everybody speaking highly of you. You want everybody giving you positive word of mouth advertisement. Everybody means everybody. If you think you're working for the boss, you may not like the boss, so you do a bad job. Guess what everybody's talking about when they talk about you? Bad performance. You might make the boss look bad, but you look worse. That's what you got to know relative to that checklist item right there. The next item on this checklist, I embrace change. Thought-provoking tip. When change happens, I focus on shining instead of whining. I already talked to you about that one, so we can move on to the next one. Next item. I do the things my boss doesn't like to do. Thought-provoking tip. I realize my boss is my number one customer, Kind of talked about that a second ago, but Jimmy Collins, our friend and mentor, former president and CEO of Chick-fil-A. He retired after 33 years in 2001. I think he's 87 or 88 years old now. He's still going strong on LinkedIn, putting out good thought-provoking content. I just read a newsletter from him this morning. He told me that was one of that item right there. Rhea's talking about how to, control of self at work. She's trying to help you excel and climb the ladder of influence. I remember one day I was out in the woods taking a walk, and I called Jimmy up, talked to him. I was standing in the middle of a beautiful creek on a rock, water flowing all around. And I asked him, I said, Jimmy, if I could share one thing that you've learned in your life with all the people I meet moving forward in my life, what would that one thing be? It was right there what Rhea just said. He said, Mac, you tell them to do what the boss don't like to do. He said that launched me in my career. He said, Truett Cathy was the founder of Chick-fil-A. Jimmy Collins was his third staff employee way back 1967. And he said, the first thing I figured out was what things did Truett not like to do, and I did those things really, really good, and Truett loved me for it. He said, so if you want to excel at work, you figure out what the boss don't like to do, and you do that. That'll make you highly valuable. He didn't say that. I'm saying that now. Do you actually do that? Can you check that item off? Do the things my boss doesn't like to do. You might not like to do them either, but you're on a mission. And that's to increase your influence with the boss. Next item on the list. I take initiative and give my best effort. Thought-provoking tip. She says, I realize if I can't be 100% committed to the team, then I should find a different team. That's powerful. And that's what I tell people. Don't moan, groan, and whine on a team. If you got to moan and groan and whine while you're on the team, you're on the wrong team. You're making yourself look bad. Get off that team. If you're going to be on a team, whether you want to be there or not, be an MVP. Be out there on the field making the most players valuable. That's who the MVP is, the person who can make the most players valuable. You need to show up. You need to be a starter. If you're going to be on the team, don't come in, moan, groan, whine, and sit on the bench. You make yourself look bad. The next item is, I don't complain about my coworkers or my boss. Whoa. We hear a lot of that, don't we? But is that you? That's what you need. When you think about this checklist, do you complain about your coworkers or your boss? Well, if you do, you can't check this item. Her thought-provoking tip, I focus my energy on what I can control. Me. What can I do? I can not talk about my coworkers or my boss. Because as soon as I'm doing that, whoever I'm talking to, I'm teaching them I'm the kind of person that talks about other people behind their back. What happens to your influence if that's what everybody thinks about you? It goes down. Next to the last checklist item here. I don't hoard information, and I freely share information to help the team or client be successful. Thought-provoking tip. I realize the most valuable player makes others players valuable. I mentioned that a minute ago. I didn't even see that one coming. I don't read ahead when I'm covering this, when I'm doing my podcast. I just pull out the stuff and let's go. No preparation. I prepare every day. I've been preparing 55 years to do this podcast today. Don't hoard information. Let it flow. If you got something somebody needs to know, go find them and tell them. Don't make them come dig it out of you. The last item on this checklist. I maintain a positive attitude at all times. Thought-provoking tip. I don't pretend there are no problems, but I look for the positive in every situation. Do you have a positive attitude? Who you think got more influence with positive people? Positive people or negative people? Common sense, right? Which one are you? Being positive in a negative situation requires a whole lot of uncommon sense. So I hope you enjoyed these last two episodes with these checklists. Like I said, I ain't mistaken. I hadn't went forward into the book, but I just remember reading the book. I'm pretty sure every step's got 2 chapters like this in it. Remember I told you early on what each step had 5 different chapters? I kind of gave you outline what they were. It's what the step is. It's climbing to the step. It's applying a step at home, applying a step at work. And then next week's episode, it'll be that 5th chapter on this step, mastering the step. So we'll talk about mastering the step of self-control on the next episode. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.